At least 2.2 billion people around the world live with near or total visual impairment, and about 1 billion of those cases could have been prevented or treated. Here in Sri Lanka, surveys show that around 1.6% to 1.7% of adults above 40 experience blindness, with many more living with significant visual impairment, a challenge that extends far beyond eyesight, touching education, employment and inclusion. Today we are joined by Tilan Wijeyesekera, a sales and marketing professional who turned banker, and he was a DGM retail banking when he began to lose his sight at the age of 39. He quit his job at 42 and, given the progressive nature of his impairment, is one step away from being legally blind. Tilan gives us a dose of what it is like to be visually impaired. He is on Kaleidoscope Dialogues today. What was it like having your sight, then losing it progressively? What was the most significant change that you experienced?
So I think the first thing was shock, and then why me phase. When this first started, I was working as a DGM in a bank, and about 10 departments. I was hardcore, almost a workaholic, you would say. I was ultra passionate about what I do. And then, not understanding how life would turn out, I decided to quit my corporate life. And in the next phase, when I started to lose the ability to read and write, that was very hard because I was wondering, okay, that's a bit of my independence going. And then I started losing the ability to recognize people, right? So I walk into a supermarket, walk into a restaurant, wherever, people look at me, I don't know how to socialize. That aspect went. And I'm a divorced father. And I remember the first few times going to pick up my kid from school at St. Thomas's, I was wondering how I'd be able to see him and pick him out of a crowd, because I used to go stand right in front of the gate, wait for him to pick me. So these are all the different kind of challenges that I started facing, and I was wondering about what my future would hold for me, really.
What do most communities misunderstand about visual impairment?
A lot of people don't understand the difference between being blind and visually impaired. Visually impaired means, now example, I'm just one step away from being legally blind. Being legally blind doesn't mean it's totally dark and you wear a pair of shades like I do and have a white cane. I haven't got to that stage. I haven't thought of getting a white cane because for me, example, crossing a road is a huge challenge. And it's not about the ability to see or not see. Sometimes I can see just enough to do it, but it's dangerous. But it's the ability of giving other people the indication of there's something wrong. So like example, with people like me who are visually impaired, the biggest problem is people think we are almost like scamming or lying or something like that, because you saw me walking here, you saw me walking up the stairs, I manage because I have peripheral vision, but I don't have central vision, which means I can't read, write, or recognize and stuff like that. So that's one of the biggest challenges, because people don't have empathy to you when you go to certain places, so you can't get assistance and they don't understand.
In your experience, what are the biggest barriers to creating awareness about the needs of visually impaired people?
People don't have empathy. They don't have an understanding of what visual impairment is, right? But people with this kind of, now we've got this opportunity going. I have my own little channels, so because I have a following, I am able to communicate that. But a lot of people who are going through visual impairments don't have that access or the ability to create awareness of what this problem is. So I guess that's the biggest problem, giving some of these people the opportunity to create awareness about what is a visual impairment and an understanding of what it is and how you could have empathy to assist people like that. I think that's one of the biggest problems.
Where do communities and public spaces fall short in accommodating people with visual impairments?
A lot of people think it's infrastructure, right? Whether it's that tactile paving, or in other countries on signal night you have the sound, right, instead of the light, because like people who are worse off me won't see the light. And in a train or a bus, you will have the next location being announced. These sort of things are very useful. We don't have that in Sri Lanka in a lot of places, right? But for me, to be honest, it's not the infrastructure, it's a mindset. The people don't understand, communities, organizations, government institutions, corporates, they don't understand what a visual impairment is or a disability is. They have it in their so-called policies, which is a farce. It's in a file somewhere on a computer and like shut down. They don't really practice it. It's just part of their CSR and corporate communications, but they don't practice it. So I would suggest that first we need to create a change in people's mindsets to understand what these kind of disabilities are, and then how you would approach them.
So, how could schools, workplaces, public transport be better designed to support inclusion?
Firstly, like the infrastructure, like the tactile paving and the announcements, the alarms, the sound-based things that you can do, and now tech, AI, and all that, assistive technology, navigation, those things can be used. But again, it comes back, for me, it's a mindset. Now, in other countries, you go to a government institution, you'll have a disability officer. You go to a school, you'll have a disability officer. In Sri Lanka, we don't have those kind of infrastructure in place and that mind space in place. So I think that's the first thing. It all comes back to mind space, creating that awareness, creating that understanding, having the policies in place, etc., to facilitate visually impaired people.
What policy changes would you like to see to make sure that there will be much more meaningful impact?
I was so happy, and the community, I guess, was so happy during the time of the last elections a couple of years ago when there was a candidate who was visually impaired or maybe totally blind who came forward, and we thought, oh wow, there's a person who will represent. I really don't see the progress, right? I really don't see the policies changing at the pace it could be, and moving from giving charity and really creating sustainability is two different things. In Sri Lanka, you have 3%. In the government sector, you should have 3% representation of disabled. How many government bodies has that? It's not there, right? Talk about policy, start there. Private sector in other countries, they're giving incentives, they're given tax breaks to employ people. What happens is it's not a charity, it's not a cost to government, because once those people with impairments come to the workforce, they contribute to society. Somebody who's getting a 10,000 handoff is earning 50,000, 100,000 rupees, is contributing to society and is no longer a burden to the government either. I mean, those sort of things have to come into place, and not only the time when it comes to gathering votes. Another couple of years again, people will come out, say, gathering votes. It's not that. From this community, give something, empower them, create sustainability.
Why do you think there's a perception that visual impairment or any person with a disability is always at the lower end of the income strata?
It's not the case, right? I mean, in my case, I have a lot of financial abilities because, of course, my history and the corporate life I had and the earnings I have. But right now, I earn very well. I do so many. I sit on public company boards. I sit in private boards. I do consultancy. I do training. I do startups. I'm contributing. There are much more talented people, much better than me. But the problem is they don't have the access. They don't have the training. They don't have the attitude shifting to be able to contribute. And because there's a lack of infrastructure, lack of support, lack of bodies in Sri Lanka, starting from the government and others who really support this. Corporate Sri Lanka shouts about inclusivity, but it's corporate communications, in my opinion. I actually get cheesed off when I see these LinkedIn things and whatever, people shout about inclusivity. In Sri Lanka, inclusivity is still stuck at women empowerment, which is great, but what about the rest of the communities? And it's a farce, in my opinion. So those sort of changes, I think, need to happen. And things like inclusivity audits and things like that should be done, even in corporate, so that you can't shout about it unless you're serious about it.
Tilan, with your regressive sight, how has that curbed your work abilities?
To be honest, Savithri, if you can believe this, I've improved. I'm better than I ever was. Okay, lack of eyesight is a huge problem, but in terms of my mind and my abilities have really improved. I used to be a corporate guy, right? And then I got into startups and consultancy, all these things. Now I got into international startups, right? Got international exposure going overseas as part of accelerator programs and things like that. I saw how world-class organizations operate in the startup space. Now I bring those learnings to corporates. And when I go and talk about strategy planning or branding or personal development and leadership, self-leadership, all that, that comes in with that international flavor, which now I have because of what I went through. And overcoming challenges, when I talk to people now, I can change people's lives.
You don't need sympathy.
No.
How are you going to change that community attitude that we have?
it's about creating that awareness and understanding. You can't be stuck at policy documents stuck in a drawer somewhere. You actually got to create that change. Like I said, bring the policy audits or the inclusivity audits in, go to corporates, go to government sector, engage with these people, explain to them how these kind of communities can add value. They should not be stuck at blue collar. They should be at every and each level. I sit on a public listed board. Right? There are much more talented, better people than me who should be sitting in those kind of positions in other corporates. Corporate management, CEOs, in other countries you have all these people who are disabled who are in those positions. Management, executive roles. We are still stuck at blue collar, supporting somebody, saying it's charity. It's not sympathy, it's empathy. The understanding that there are so many talented people who could contribute to your organizations and to establishments. And believe me, these people will be a lot more passionate and a lot more loyal to you than the average person as well.
If and when you do lose your sight completely, how would that change you and what you do?
It will be very tough. Right now I'm totally independent. I live alone in an apartment and totally independent. I go here and there. Right now I'm able to navigate different things using my accessibility tech solutions and things like that. But once total darkness hits, it's a different game. But just like I progressed all this time going from full sight to partial sight and the inability to read and write and see faces, recognize all that, I've improved myself, right? Even last night I was with this guy who's totally blind. I was telling you about during the break about how he fixed my smart glasses. I don't know anybody whose Meta smart glasses work in Sri Lanka because there's a restriction at the moment. But he's figured it out. He's totally blind. His phone is totally dark, right? He just operates like this. So I need to improve myself.
So Tilan, what's the one message you would like to give a Sri Lankan to understand about living with visual impairment?
Start having some empathy. Try to understand what a person is going through. Most people who have these sort of problems, what they want is not sympathy, they want empathy and they want support at times. Just try to understand what they are going through and what kind of support you could give them. Be a good Samaritan, right? That's all. Yeah.
Stay connected with Kaleidoscope. Watch, follow and keep up with us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram and LinkedIn.
You focus on your goals. We will take care of the risks. Silly Life.